Absolutely. I mean, I kind of like doing like the soft open, which is exactly what we're doing now.
Mhm.
So, hey friends, welcome to another episode of the Ouroboros Express Devlogs. I feel like my introductions every time have been different, but that's okay. That's the energy we're going in with. It's a little bit wonky. Every pancake is kind of like the first pancake over here for some reason, but I'm joined. I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by my friend Steph. Hey, Steph.
Hey.
Hello. Hey. So before we get into it, because I know there's so much that I want to know about you and so much that I want to talk about with you, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Stephanie. I go by Stephanie or Steph, either or works. I am a UX UI designer at Small Loan Studio, and I had the pleasure of working on Oryx from the patch version to the Game Jam version, or the Game Jam version to the patch version.
Yes, yes, exactly, and that is exactly what we are going to talk about today. So, UI UX, I think is it's one of those terms that I feel like maybe people outside of it might not have a pretty clear idea of it. Like, 'cause, when people see game art, they're like, "Yeah, I get it. It's game art," But what is UI UX first of all?
Yeah, God, that's so hard to like take an entire industry and just like sum it up into a sentence or two. So I will try my best. So please, my fellow UXers, do not butcher me. But I would say UI UX is kind of taking the end-to-end experience from a user perspective or a player, since we're in gaming, and kind of just making sure that from when you start the game all the way to when the game is over, like your entire experience is smooth from start to finish. Like the buttons work, the game works, the music works, you understand the story, the game is not inaccessible. You can change the settings to, accommodate whatever needs you might have, and kind of just tailor the game so that when you play, you're like, oh wow, like this game was sick, and it kind of was customizable to the needs that I have. So hopefully that was a good answer.
That was incredibly succinct. No, and I think it also demonstrates how actually everybody at some point in game dev probably has had some touch in UI UX, but probably hasn't even realized it as well. From that description, and I think that's really wonderful about it. But I think the I guess the blessing and a curse about UI UX is that when it's good, you don't notice. And when it's bad, you do, because
No,
your that means your game experience is really frustrating. So how do you feel about that? Do you feel a bit like, oh man, I'm kind of like in the back end worrying about all this stuff?
yes, definitely. I mean, all the way from indie to AAA, there are, games that you'll play and you'll turn this on and you'll say, "What is this?" And like that's how you know it
That's how you
has
know.
that's how you know it has bad UX, when like the text is super small and you can't read it, or things are pixelated, or there's no instructions, and you're
Yeah.
just thrown into a game and you're like, where do how do I don't know. Like then that kind of is like, I'm not playing this, and then you stop playing it.
That is bad UX. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's a deeply interesting field to be in, and I think it really does suffer from that. So I think next time, guys, if you're playing a game and you've had a really super smooth experience, thank the UX designer, thanks the UX strategist behind it all. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'd love to learn a bit more about you. Tell me about your path into game dev. What was the before, where you currently now? Tell me all about it.
For sure, yeah. So
Yeah.
I kind of fell into UI UX, which is kind of, I feel like either you choose it or you fall into it. I feel like that's the consensus on
Whoa, UI UX, yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so I'm an actor first and foremost. I've been acting for over 10 years, and I've always had like various part-time jobs. And so I was working at a wellness studio, and they saw that I did my own website, and they were like, "Oh, can you like do our website?" I was like, "I did it on Squarespace. It's so easy, but okay." So I did their website, and then people loved it,
Wow.
and then people liked my actor website, and they were like, "Oh, can you do mine?" And then it just became like this word of mouth kind of thing, where I'm like, "Wow,
Amazing.
I'm like, wow, I'm being paid to do like people's websites like here and there. Like that's pretty cool." And then it kind of turned into visual design. I was working on visuals. And then someone mentioned to me, "Oh, you're doing UI UX." I was like, "I'm doing what now?" And after that, I like fell down the rabbit hole. I was like, "Oh my God, this is like a whole industry. It's a whole field." I was like, "This is so cool."
Yeah.
And so I just got my nose to the books and just started like reading all the online resources, following like people on LinkedIn to like read through, learning about like Don Norman and like the design of everyday things and like all the stuff behind it. So then I landed an internship at an agency, got hired full time as a UX designer, and then that I like really learned a lot of my UX skill sets that I have now. Wow. And then through there, one of my coworkers, the lovely Allison, who's voicing Vivi in this game, she mentioned that there was game UX. I was like, oh my God, I hadn't even thought that you could do UX in games, because we were just like gossiping and chatting about our favorite games and just like talking about animes and stuff like that. And we were just like, okay, like this is like where we're bonding. So then when she told me about game UX, I was like, okay, let me fall down that rabbit hole. And I don't know who on LinkedIn or what, but I saw your comment on someone's like LinkedIn, like, oh, like I'm building a game and I'm looking for people to join. So I like messaged you on LinkedIn, and then that's how I joined Small World Studio to work on Orex. Wow. So it was all just like very serendipitous, I think.
It is incredibly serendipitous. And also you are like really prolific as well, because I have to say, like, you're in like a bunch of other projects too as well. Like, do you want to talk a little bit about like the other things you're in?
If anyone's been like lurking on LinkedIn, you might see me lurking as
me
well.
I'm the one lurking on LinkedIn.
Yes, I am a serial lurker. Like, I've had people tell me all the time, like, oh, you should post. And like, no, I'm not. I'm not posting. I am a serial lurker though, so at some point in time you might have seen my profile, like, Stephanie, viewed your profile. Like, you might have seen that on LinkedIn.
I'm just nosy, yeah.
I'm just nosy, I'm just curious. I like to look at things. But yeah, so I started working at Small Loan, started doing a couple of game jams, and then I saw posts at Cave Bear Games. I joined, the studio exploded, and we have like 20,000 followers now on our page, which is like insane.
Okay. Yeah,
it's crazy. So I'm working on a cozy game with them, and then I'm working over at Irradiate on an untitled sci-fi first-person shooter. So I kind of have my hand in like multiple different pots, like a crazy person.
You know, like a crazy person. you know. Yeah, very normal.
Very normal.
Yeah. But I love that, because like clearly it sounds like you are led by your passions and your curiosity, and hey, we've been able to benefit from your amazing work.
Thank you.
And I feel so lucky because like your work on the Game Jam version was so great, because you really gave us that really extra it just really elevated the game, I felt like, because you made the custom UI. And we simply did not have time to really talk about UX like too much at the time, to be fair. But so do you want to talk about like the experience of making a game in 30 days with us on the team?
Oh my God. I mean, well, first, the disclaimer I'm going to say is it was my first game jam. It was the best game jam. It was the only game jam that was phenomenal from start to finish. Anyone who has done game jams knows it's either amazing or it's a hot mess. So I have been through the entire ringer of having Small Loan being so amazing, and like everyone was so nice and so sweet and collaborative, and you guys were always open to questions and things like that. And then I did other jams that were just the opposite of that. We'll talk about those.
We can absolutely talk about that. Yeah, and I think it's really important, because I think like for anybody who wants to join the games industry, the advice is always do game jams. But then there's like, what if someone has a really bad experience on a game jam? Will they be scared of forever? And we don't want that. We want all the talented
people. Well, you spoiled me. So that's the thing. When people ask me like, what was your first game jam? I'm like, we had a whole studio, we had a PM, we had a Notion, like we had all the things. So it's like, it was a studio. Like, what do you mean?
You know, like all game jams, you know? And people are like, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, like, I kind of just applied, so because I work at an agency, it's very fast paced, and so you kind of work off of like best practices and you know, what other competitors are doing, so I kind of just took all of that same workflow and logic and just applied it to games. And so I remember you were telling me like, oh, I want this like Art Deco style. I was like, okay, cool. Started looking at Art Deco references, and then just started kind of pulling in different elements, and then getting your sign off. I was like, okay, I guess we're done.
I was like, nailed it.
I was
what more is
expecting for you to be like, no, like fix this, fix that. But I was like, oh, she likes it. Okay, cool.
I was like, it was totally, it totally matched the vision. I think also there's like a really nice, I think I felt like there was a really nice shortcut between us because we both had our prior work that we've been in, and so we were bringing in that prior experience just as a couple of career changes, and so like, and I've worked with agencies before. You were at you were in an agency, so like I kind of feel like we were like connecting on that level as well. But it just so happened the context we were in was in a game jam. So yeah, because I remember so I originally had this huge mirror board. And that's where I put a lot of like the mood boards and like what I wanted to go for. So I really felt like you took that and you're like, yeah, you kind of put that through your filter and then you nailed it, really.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was the direction that you guys provided. Because I didn't know what a game design document was. I didn't know what anything of anything was. So you guys really like help explain like that and like the core game loop and all those things. So I think I just applied all that logic and then just shared the files. And I think just being able to work like that, even though we were in different time zones in different countries, like we just made it work, which is kind of great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the really cool thing about our team is we're really from all over the place. Like, obviously there's clusters of us in the US and the UK. But there was, a bunch of people like, our art lead was from Bangladesh and, we had like people from all over the place. I think we have some people in the server from like Singapore and Malaysia.
Yeah,
so
that's such a cool thing. Like I feel like game jams are so good for that, where you can really meet people from all over the world, which is really cool. Because if you do like, just your friends, it might just be like people like in school or work or stuff like that. But when you're joining a game jam with a bunch of strangers, it's like you have people like in Europe and Asia and the US, and you guys are all just like collaborating and having meetings at all hours of the day.
Yes, the meetings. Okay, so I feel like meetings, I love them or I hate them. I feel like they're really at the center of a lot of game jams. Do you want to talk about like your experience of like meetings with us? Were you coming on at stupid o'clock or were they kind of like sensible for you?
I think it depends. Like if they were on the weekend, I didn't care because I'm okay, it's the weekend, like whatever.
Yeah.
I don't recall, God, because the game jam was this year, but it feels like 10 years ago.
It really does. Yeah, a lot has happened since then.
I don't remember if we had any like late night meetings, but I was like inside of the Discord server, so I could see when you guys were meeting, and I think I was just like answering questions through the channel. And that was when I learned how to use Discord, because I had Discord for a few years, but I never really touched it. So this was my first time like being in Discord and seeing its usability issues that we won't talk about, and being in every channel, like figuring out how to use it and stuff like that, and kind of knowing how to ping everyone and all that. So I think all the times were reasonable for my department of one, which was me.
Yeah, I think really like so I've worked remotely for like quite a few years now. So and I've worked in companies where like people are global as well. So it was actually a really natural fit for me to direct a bunch of you asynchronously. And I really one of the things I did try to make sure was that our meeting notes were really on point. So even if you couldn't make the meeting, at least you knew exactly what was going on or what actions there were for you. So I'm glad that that was like one of the habits that we started early on that I'm glad that we instilled from the beginning. Yeah, and I think and then getting everyone into Notion was like the other thing which I'm like really glad about as well.
Notion is amazing. It's like a perfect organizational tool. Like I love, like I'm the person who will color code things. So like I love a mirror board, I love a Fig Jam board. So with Notion and just the way it's just all set up is just amazing.
It is really perfect for like game dev and getting people organized as well. And like people might think like, okay, yeah, just for a project that's like only running for like a month, do you really need it? Trust me, you need it. The amount that we used Notion was unbelievable.
Honestly, I feel like for what we did in 30 days was more than any company would do for 30 days. Like the amount of tasks and QA and things that were being moved from like start in progress done. I was like, damn, you guys are really out here cranking out tasks. Like,
we were doing it all. And I mean, it's really interesting because I think it's that thing where you have a vague sense of like how game dev should go, but then I hadn't. It was also only my second game jam, and so I only had like a really vague idea of like how game dev is supposed to go. Like a lot of it, I was going off like common sense or like maybe like transferring logic and transferable skills from my career into
Yeah.
this. I had no idea that you didn't have to make a whole game for a game jam, and I didn't know this.
I mean, honestly, like that's why I say you spoiled me because every game I've only done 6 game jams, but the ones that I did after yours, I was like, okay, so these are the expectations. So I assumed that we would have a complete game by the end of the jam. So
Yeah.
I did jams that were like 72 hours, 10 days. I think that was the longest one. So I did just a few that were either 3 days or a week. And when I
Yeah.
tell you a lot of these games did not have a complete like end-to-end experience, I was like, damn, I really thought it was gonna be like this. And there were so many things that I wanted that just didn't make the game jam cut. Like I had a list of like, oh, fix
Mm.
these UX issues, fix these accessibility issues, let's add this, let's add that.
Yeah.
Not even half of that made it into the jam version.
Damn you,
So
small loan,
yes, I was
spoiling me.
so spoiled. So I was like, damn, this is not what I thought it
This
would
is
be.
not the vision.
Not
Yeah. I've heard a lot of horror stories. Like I think for me, I really deeply feel like 30-day game jams are the sweet spot for me because it means that I can really come up with something. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be like pretty good at the end of 30 days, whereas like I feel like making 72-hour stuff like for me anyway, like or 70 game jams, like I'm not gonna it's really gonna frustrate me personally to not like be able to do all the things that I want to do. So yeah, yeah, I've definitely been spoiled by the small known experience of being on a game jam too, and
No, for real. And then after I did
yeah.
like 6, I was like, that's it. Like I'm all jammed out. Let me just focus on the 10 long-term projects I'm working on right now.
Oh, okay, let's talk about that. So yeah, so we finished the Orex or the Ouroboros Express, and then there was a bit of a break, and then we started on the patching about a month ago. So yeah, I mean, do you wanna talk about like what have you been doing in that break? I guess in between.
Yeah, so at Small Loan, for those who are unaware, in between games, there's pitching going on, and people will pitch their ideas. So we had a creative director kind of pitch his game, which is an upcoming 2D pixel horror game. So initially, I signed on to be a consultant for that game, and then I became very ambitious because I was like, I'm done with the Oryx patch, so let me also lead the team on this one. And then I quickly realized with all the stuff I have going on, I'm like, okay, let me revert back to being a consultant.
Hey, yeah.
Just because I felt the need to like do so many gaming projects to set myself up so that way when other studios are like, oh, like what games have you shipped? I'm like, I've got this, and that. And
Yes.
oh wow, like in 12 months time, like you really cranked out all these titles. And some of them are finished, some are in progress, but I cannot wait till they're done. And then I will never stack up these many projects ever again, I promise you.
This has also been my experience as well, where I'm so because like my journey into game dev is really only like well, it's almost exactly a year actually, because like about a year ago I made a decision to take a narrative design class, and it started like rolling from there. But yeah, I totally feel that, where I'm just like, the games industry feels really difficult to get into. I know what I'll do. I'm gonna like do a whole bunch of like projects, so I've got stuff that I'm really proud of and I can talk about. But then at some point I was just like, I've overcommitted. I don't know what I'm
Oh my God. Yes.
I'm extremely stretched thin.
Yes, it's that same ambition. Like I think this
Yeah.
December I make a year of trying to get into games, and I'm like I overcommitted. So I'm
I've done a
seeing
lot.
everything through to the finish line, but there are projects that we've pushed to like early next year to kind of give like wiggle room and breathing room and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely understand. But I will say the biggest and best compliment I always get is from my Oryx work. So that's why it's like one of the projects I have still on my website as a case study, which I need to update the format of it now that we've done like patch updates and stuff like that. But that's the one that catches people's eyes. Like I've spoken to studios and they're like, yeah, like we really liked your Oryx works. I'm like, okay, that's what's getting me noticed at the big studio.
Amazing.
So I say don't poo-poo on game jams. Like find like maybe one or two that
Mm-hmm.
are maybe like 30 days, maybe a little longer. And if you
Yeah.
can really crank out some good work and really speak to that whole process, like they can see like, oh wow, like you did, a
Yeah.
whole end-to-end experience. Like you'd be a great fit at our studio, you know?
Well, this is it. I think like it's really important to know what why are you getting into game jams for, and is it to make a portfolio piece or is it just to like flex your muscles? Because like, those are like two completely different ends as well. Like if you
Hmm.
think about it, because if it's just like I've been stuck in a rut, be good just to like jump into like a 72-hour thing and just really like flex those muscles again,
Yeah.
which is totally different to being like I want to have like a portfolio piece that I'm like really proud of and
Hmm.
it's part of like a full thing, then I think that's when getting into like a longer game jam is really worth it as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, because oftentimes in like shorter game jams, I mean even the 30-day game jam you were in, like sometimes like that stuff is like just purely like pushed to the back burner because
Hmm.
people don't have the space to think about like UX. They're like really concerned about like, oh my god, we need to do all the art, we need to do all the writing, we need to make sure this game doesn't just like break and like implode in on itself. So you guys don't necessarily have the luxury of like thinking like, okay, like is this experience like totally broken for someone? And what can we do to fix that? So
Right.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that's like the advice I would have given to myself like a year ago, to be like, okay, if you're getting into game jams, like just be very aware of like what you're getting in for.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think for me, I was going in with two goals. One, to have a portfolio piece, first and
Hmm.
foremost, and then second, to have a completed game. Like that was the thought process going into jams.
Yeah.
So just know that that might not always be the case, but that was the goal and intention behind it. And then I learned like, okay, like if I really want a game and portfolio piece that people like and want to play and stuff, then it needs to be like a longer term project outside of a jam
Yeah.
setting. And even for
Totally.
games that are outside of a jam setting, I think with UX, trying to get it as early as possible
Hmm.
is what will help make the game good. So I know with jams, like it's difficult to think about it, but if you bring in a UX UI designer, they will try from the start to just incorporate some of those best practices early on, and then that way
Absolutely.
the game could kind of be good. So we might be annoying. We might be saying to programming, "Hey, can you fix this? Can you fix that?" And it might be kind of like frustrating, like, "Why is this person, like breathing down my neck?" But it's like it's because of these reasons, and we're trying to help you see that the game will be better if you incorporate these things versus just ignoring it and saying like, "Oh, it's not needed."
Yeah, 100%. Like that's the other thing I realized about game dev as well. Okay, so I talk about this game all the time. I Frostpunk is my comfort game, and I've put many hundreds of hours into it. And basically, if you're not aware, it's like a city builder game. And it's like in a like an ice age essentially, like because climate change or whatever. So, so there's so much disease and like starvation and like decision making in it. It's a really stressful game, but I like find it really comforting. Don't ask me why. I don't know what's going on in my brain. But the thing that I realized about it is that like for every like a winning game in Frostpunk, you have to have like you have to have made really good decisions like at the beginning, because it's so much harder to have made bad decisions than then course correct. And it actually does an amazing analogy for game dev because you
Yes.
really have to start out with good decisions, a good foundation, because it's so much harder. It's not impossible, but it's so much harder to course correct like midway through production in terms of like, oh damn, we did not do this the right way, or we really need to just start from scratch on this.
And
Yeah.
honestly, you'd be surprised how much that happens
Mm,
in games and outside of games,
mm, mm.
where you've thought out the whole process, you've done the research, you've wireframed things, you've colored things. Like we are moving on to implementation, and then they're like, oh wait, this thing needs to be updated, and you have to circle back and re-update
Man.
wireframes, re-update things, and kind of do that whole cycle again. So it
Yeah.
happens more often than you think that you're, 2 days away from launch and you're like, wait, go back.
And I think one thing I realized is that actually, whatever time you think you need for pre production or any sort of preparation, tack on a bit more time onto it, because
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
it's annoying, but
Mhm.
it's totally worth it to save like time and resources down the
Yes, and
road.
also you can't rush creativity. Like that's something,
Yeah.
you know, whether you're working in games or outside of games, it takes time to be creative and think through strategy and do all these things. So
Yeah.
sometimes people will come up to your department and say, "Oh, can we get this thing by tomorrow?" You're like, "I need like 2 months to like go through this, and then I will
Yeah.
present the best possible thing, or you could just get something good by tomorrow. But if you want something like outstanding, I need time."
Yeah, 100%. I definitely, I mean that, and that goes for any creative field as well. It's like you really need to be given the space to, yes, do some preparation and then do like a first draft of anything,
Mhm.
and then to sit back and then think on it. Because sometimes your brain will be doing the work in the background and be like, actually, there's a much better way of doing that, or giving you the space
Exactly.
to iterate upon it as well.
Exactly. And even when
Yeah,
you're doing something like with design, when you're creating something off based off best practices,
yeah,
you sometimes have to check your bias and say like, okay, like
totally.
I know that this looks good, but also let me hand this off to like other senior designers or have friends and family
Mm-hmm.
look at this and have people with different disabilities look at this and tell me like, oh, this works, this doesn't work, and keep me in check. So that way I know like I'm not just going to sit here and say, well, this is the best practice, this works for everyone. Like, no, like let me look at this and make sure, does this work for everyone? Is this good in this specific case?
Yeah.
Because something that might have been award winning on one product might not be award winning for this specific product, because if it doesn't make sense to have it, why are we trying
Yeah.
to do it and
Yeah,
copy? Hmm.
exactly. And that's where that's I think a mistake that I see, even big studios make, where like trying to apply one thing to another like for like doesn't make a lot of sense when you think
Hmm.
about like, when you go back to the core of like what the game is about, what the player
Hmm.
fantasy is. And and I think it's so important to have that sense of like, okay, let's go back to like what is the fantasy behind the game, and like what are we actually trying to achieve with this game, rather than
Exactly.
just like copying and pasting like one
Yes, which
UI. Yeah.
which I think can happen, especially because we're working in the indie space. I think a
Hmm.
lot of studios will look at a game and say, "Oh my God, like this game is amazing. Like I want us to be that game." And it's just like, okay, like let's not copy paste this exact game with just a different title on the front. Like let's actually see,
Yeah.
what is it about this specific game that you like? Like what elements do you like? How can we analyze it, make it better,
Yeah.
or just make our own spin on it, essentially.
Yeah, totally. Because I think for us as well, I think what really made it special with the Europa's Express Game Jam version was that every element of it, I felt like each of the teams really made sure to give it the Oryx feel and look, and something really unique and distinct. Because like it, so the art deco thing really goes back to like the Orient Express, that luxury train, and like those art deco touches. And art deco, I always feel like it's kind of a shortcut for like luxury,
Yeah.
but there's a kind of like intimidating factor to it, or like a coldness to it as well. Despite all like the gold and the glitziness, and so like that's kind of something that I wanted to put in. And like the thing with like spirals and like snake motifs and Ouroboros motifs everywhere as well. I think we really did such a, like, I felt like the team did such a good job of like, putting that flavor into it. And that's not something we took from like another game or anything. It naturally
Mhm.
was just us being like, okay, how can we like take this motif and like put it into every
I know,
element
yeah.
of the
Yeah, if
game?
we had the scope to make it like 3D, like open world, I would
Oh,
have
watch
everywhere where you,
out.
yeah, where you're just walking around and you'll just see like subtle hints of it and kind of give you that chill, so you
Yeah.
can kind of have the goosebumps while you're walking through the train. Oh, a 3D version, guys, let's do it.
Let's do it.
3D open world.
But yeah, I think, yeah, it's so important to always bring it back to what is the core, what are the themes. So yeah, so we've talked a bit about the game jam version. So now we go into the patch version.
Patch version.
Patch version. What's very cool is that I extended the production time to 3 months, and we already have the original game. So this truly is just like, okay, how can we polish this thing that we love so much and like really elevate it to the next level? And for you, what was your interpretation of that?
Yeah, I mean, I was so excited because when you do something in 30 days, you're bound to miss so many things.
Absolutely.
So with the patch version, I could go back and see like accessibility things that I missed and changing out fonts, making font sizes bigger, incorporating accessibility options. And shout out to Alice, our accessibility consultant, who we worked together to kind of make sure that these features were at the front of the game and it was not something that was like hidden, because we did have feedback like, oh, like I wanted to, make the text bigger or have like self-voicing, but I didn't know where it was. So now we made sure that like it's at the start of the game and you can kind of like customize it to your needs.
Yes.
And then just like changing contrast on certain things, introducing new UI elements, which, we discussed, and I can't wait to see them live in the game, but just adding just like little subtle details to kind of add like zhuzh.
Yeah, we're zhuzhing it up. Yeah, 100%. That's my favorite thing to say. We're zhuzhing it up. Yeah, for sure. Yes, exactly. So yeah, accessibility is so important, and I think the games industry is definitely getting a lot better, especially in like recent years, about thinking about it from the beginning and not just like, oh, let's just chuck subtitles. And I feel so lucky that I got both you and Alice working together to really think quite deeply about adding accessibility, and then also like really having that as a layer on top of the user experience. So that was very cool. And you said something really interesting that kind of stuck out to me in Discord, which is you said something like, oh, I have more tools in my like UX toolbox now. And was that purely from like taking part in so many game jams and like training yourself up in the past
Yeah,
years?
it's been that, and then also through my UX outside of games. So much happens within a year, so much happens within 3 months. And I feel like within the last couple of months, I've accelerated and aged like 10, 20 years. So within that span, like outside of games, I work on so many projects since I'm in an agency setting. So I've worked on, design systems, done accessibility audits for these big, billion-dollar clients. And so going through those experiences and saying like, oh, these are tools that we use like at a corporate level to check for accessibility and things like that, and other tools, just kind of pulling that into my toolbox. So now when I'm working on games, if someone's like, oh, how do I check for contrast? I have a tool for that. And I can check to see that the UI, passes contrast and passes the WCAG standards. And that's something that people wouldn't think of until after the fact, or if at all. So I think just kind of showing that. And I've started to kind of train the art team on other studios and games I'm working on. So that way when they're, creating art, they'll come to me and they'll say, oh, Steph, does this look good? Is this legible? Like, can we see this? Because I myself fall into that habit where you're just designing just to design. And you're like, oh my God, this looks great. Like, pat on the back. And you're like, girl, I can't see it. I can't see anything on this. So I think just kind of showing people like, these are the tools you use to check yourself. Then you can kind of start to incorporate accessibility from the start. So that way you're designing with that already in mind.
Yeah, exactly. And a focus on accessibility means more people will be able to enjoy your game. And who doesn't want that? That's an amazing thing to aim for as well. There's different, there's all sorts of like different disabilities. I think the UK government actually has this really great resource that breaks it down. But I remember looking at it a while back, just from my marketing work, actually, things around like permanent disabilities and like temporary ones, and for every thing that you don't think about in terms of accessibility, you're essentially cutting out a big chunk of the population who just aren't able to enjoy this beautiful thing you've made,
which is unfair. Like it's annoying to think that a lot of studios will say like, oh, like we made this game for everyone. Did you make it for everyone? Did you check to see that this game actually has all these features for those, who have different disabilities, and making sure that we're catering to their needs? And I know that Xbox is releasing different controllers that have adaptive support. So it's just, I wish that there were more PC games and other console games that would kind of work on incorporating these features. So like you said, it is getting better. Like I think everyone is starting to pick up on it and realizing that making something accessible for one group makes it for everyone. Because I can't see the tiny little letters when I'm watching, a movie from really far away. So being able to increase subtitles or being able to increase, text size on a game or a movie is always beneficial. So the little things kind of help everyone and not just that one group. So I don't know, fight the fight. Like,
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, and Alice has done a really amazing job of really just calling attention to things that like I'll put like we talked about biases, right? So we are ultimately within like our own bubble and our own realities, and she's been great at bringing attention to like, well, actually, how about this thing? Have you guys thought about this? I'm like, no, but actually, yeah, that is really important.
Exactly, yeah, because that's something I've come across like in my work, both in and out of games. I've had people will say like, oh, this is obvious. Everyone knows this. And I'm like, actually, no, everyone does not know this.
Yeah.
Not everyone is super into tech or super high modern or has like all the apps, all the things. Not everyone is chronically online to know like how these things work and function. So you have to cater to everyone, all age groups, because not everyone is as tech savvy as you would think. So try and just give a little bit of extra help and just say like, hey, this thing does that, instead of just assuming, oh, they know what it does, like we're good. Like, no, let's go back.
No. Yeah. 100% no. Actually,
Exactly.
back to the drawing board with you. But yeah,
Exactly.
it's so important. Yeah, I'm really excited to see all of the new stuff incorporated into the new builds of the game, because I played one build where we added some of the stuff, and it really already like changed the experience so much. Actually, and it was just a tiny thing. I think we're incorporating whichever character is speaking, there's like a little outline.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that just adds so much more to the experience of playing the game. Because I think the thing that people forget about as well is like, like this is still like a piece of software that we're essentially creating, and we have to like also implement some best practices from that side as well. Like it's yes, there's a creative element, but we also have to make sure that like there are technical and very mechanical things that we need to make sure we're incorporating to make this as smooth as possible.
Absolutely.
So I have to say, you've been an absolute powerhouse, by the way, because you took one look at all the tasks and you're like, I'm just gonna get at that in like a sprint, okay? It's not gonna be a problem for anybody. I'm just gonna do that. So could you tell me about your process of like your experience of like the process so far, and like like what your general like workflow is like?
Yeah, so I like to assess things by what's the most difficult thing. So if I'm in
Yes.
motion and I'm looking at tasks, that kind of helps speed things along, because I say, okay, which task is the hardest? Then I won't do that one first. I will do everything that's really minor, like change the color on this or increase the size on that. That takes 2 seconds for me. So I will just like do the update in Figma, export it, upload it to the drive, like bing, bam, boom, we're done. But if something is more complex, then I'm like, okay, let me take the time needed to like go through this, share it with you, get feedback, get it approved, go again, just do that iteration cycle. And then tag and programming, because they also keep me in check too, because I might suggest something that is like, this engine cannot support that. Like, okay, cool. Let's go back and fix this and do what the engine can support. And then like, it's cool. Okay, cool. And then just kind of moving through the task board that way. But yeah, it's just me. I love just checking things off and getting things done. I think it's a habit, and I like that rush. The high.
The little dopamine rush of like moving
Yes,
something from in progress to done.
yes,
We
just
love
moving
that.
it to done.
Yeah.
Great. The faster I can put my feet up, the better.
Yeah, I used to joke because one of my specialties in is marketing automation. I used to joke that like I'm so lazy, I will just put more effort into setting up an automation so I can be lazy for longer in
Yes.
future.
Literally. No, I mean
I'm
that's
proud
me.
when
Like
I'm
I've always
done.
done that like in past jobs, just like whatever can be automated, even before like the AI craze, there were other tools that would automate things.
Yeah.
So whatever I can do to make my life easier, why not? Like why are
Yeah.
we struggling
Yeah.
to take so long to do these things? Like if we can do these things super fast, I'll
Yeah.
just get it done. Now, what takes long is, like I said, strategizing, thinking about things, brainstorming, coming against a creative roadblock. But once that's sorted, then it's just like flowing, and then you can just kind of knock things out. But yeah, if I can finish things and I still have the rest of the day, it's a win.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, totally. I mean, I think this is really important for any designer or creative is that actually get your skills to a point where you feel that you are in the groove of being able to do most things, or like you can, you've at least got a foundation, because like once you've got that, the most difficult thing is going to be thinking about the project that you are having to write or draw or design. That is ultimately the most important and most difficult part of the task, because it really is about like, well, how am I gonna approach this, and like, is it gonna look good, and like, is it gonna be usable, is it gonna be legible, there's all of that stuff. And
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and for your workflow, well, let's say like you're given a brief. What does your workflow look like from brief to
From brief to
delivering?
yeah. Yeah, so I'll go over the brief and then I will kind of ask questions like I might be all up in your DMs or in the channel just asking questions.
Yes.
And then what I start to do is reference gathering. So I look at, what are we trying to emulate, kind of create like a mood board. And then I will look up competitors and kind of see like what are our competitors doing, or what's something similar that already works in the industry, and just kind of, look at that, poke holes at it. I'll read reviews and see where, and I'll filter it by 1 star and just kind of go through and see like what people have said. Like, oh, this game is beautiful, but like it's so tiny, like I can't, move around. I'm like, okay, cool, like note to self. So
Yeah.
I'll look at all of that and kind of compile all that data. I wish my Figma files were like clean and organized as I portray myself to be, but no, they're a mess. Like,
Nobody needs to know that.
no one doesn't know that, but if you were to open my Figma files, it's like you have to kind of circle around, like where are we? Like there's a method to the madness. I know where active files are. I know where
Yep.
older things are, so I kind of organize it in a way that makes sense for me.
Yeah.
But then I clean things up and I hand it off to someone else. But if I'm working with other designers, I clean up my files, guys. Don't worry.
Naming the lists, naming the
I label
items.
everything. Yes, it's not frame 1 through 1,000. Like labeled, like everything is normal. But if it's just me, I'm like I don't need to. It's just me. Like,
Listen, we're looking for frame 632. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah. I mean, would you like? What advice would you give to, say, like directors or even just other people in game dev? Like, how can they make your job easier, when it comes to giving you a brief, or even just like collaborating with like UI UX people?
Yeah, I would say giving the UX department more love, because I think UX is often overlooked, and people will say like, we don't really get what you do. Like, are you a concept artist? Are you a graphic designer? Like, I don't understand.
To that, I say use Google. Google exists, okay? That's a stupid question. Like,
And
we
it's what we get often.
yeah.
It comes up often. They just don't understand what it is that we do. So I think giving us the space to say like, hey, like I did some research for the game and I would like to present it to you. Or hey, like I updated these wireframes, I would like to show you and get your input. Because the last thing I want to do is think that everything is going good and then you finally lay eyes on it and you're like, what is this? Like I didn't, this was not the vision. Like I didn't want this. I'm like, this is why we tried to pull you in early. So you get that buy-in
Get feedback.
Yes,
Come
get
on.
feedback
Yeah.
early. And that's something I try to incorporate throughout my process. So once like I have all my references and I've looked at competitors and things, I already try to keep accessibility in mind and best practices in mind. And I don't always hit the mark. I obviously am just a person. I'm just a girl. So I miss things here and there.
Yeah.
But I try to pull people in to like look at it, fact check, and say like, oh, what's this? Do we need that? And then just kind of bounce back and forth.
Yeah.
And then pull in programming and find out like what's feasible, because I know we're not using Unity for this project, but for other projects, I've learned Unity is not super friendly when it comes to like assets and things. And sometimes things need to be recreated from scratch because it just can't handle the export, or it can't, with Figma or with Adobe, you can kind of take an asset and really move it precisely and put it precisely where you want. But with Unity, sometimes it's not like that, and you might need to recreate it within Unity so that it fits to those
Wow.
parameters versus the parameters you set. So I've been learning firsthand how frustrating some of these
Oh my
engines
goodness.
can be. So I wish that there was like an easier process to kind of just like have everything going into one engine. But I try to get feedback at every point to like say, hey, does this
Yeah.
look good? Does this make sense? Does this work? Can you send me a screen recording of it in the engine as well?
Yeah, yeah.
So I could see like, okay, perfect,
Yeah.
it looks cool. That kind of flow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'm a big believer of this like shorter iteration loops because it's always better to catch something early in the
Early, yes,
process.
yes.
And the earlier you can catch it, the better. Because like we say, course correction is really, really difficult once you're like far enough along in the
Yeah, and
project.
that's something I would tell people like if you're starting a game, please
Mm-hmm.
have UX reviews like every week. Just make sure
Yeah.
you're in the loop, you know what's going on so that you don't wait till 2 days before launch and find out that the biggest feature is broken. Like,
Yeah, totally. I mean, this is also why for this production process, I broke it up into 2 week sprints because that really enables me to like and the production team to check in on things on a really regular basis. It also like kind of gives everybody that momentum of like, okay, I need this is something a deliverable in 2 weeks time. Okay, because I feel like if you give somebody like 4 weeks to do something, and when I say somebody, I mean me, they'll take 3 weeks of faffing about, and then they'll like kind of wait
no,
till like
but
the
you're
last.
describing me like
But that's literally me.
literally like
Yeah.
I need time, but don't give me
Yeah.
too much time because I will fluff about on
Yeah,
final
yeah,
hour where I'm like, oh, I
truly.
can do this.
Yeah, and especially if it's a voluntary project as well, right? Because like that's a really special thing about the Ouroboros Express, guys. When you play it, like keep in mind that this is all totally voluntary. Nobody was being paid, and we were all doing this on top of like going to school,
Going
doing
to
full time
school, working
jobs.
full time.
Yeah, it's a honestly it's a real achievement like for the team. When I look at everything, I'm like, oh my god, they really knocked it out of the park, like, on top of doing everything else that they're doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah. My
yeah.
schedule is working 9 to 5, and then
Mm-hmm.
I'm in school right now, so doing some schoolwork, and then
Yeah.
heading straight to do Oryx work, and then meeting on weekends and stuff like that. So my schedule is chaotic, but there is a method to the madness. It's almost done. Like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and then I promise you, I will never do this again.
Okay, we're gonna hold you to
Just
that. We'll see
one
next
project
year.
at a time. Like I will not stack on so many things. I promise.
Yes, absolutely. That's so funny. So okay, let's do a bit of a time warp in terms of like your journey. It's been about a year, I guess, for both of us. Less than a year for you.
Games, yeah.
What's something that you wish you'd kind of done from the beginning of your like game dev journey?
First, find small loans.
We at? Yeah. Yeah.
Avoid the 5 other jams I did. No, I will say one of
Yeah.
the jams was where I met Alice, and so I brought her into small loan. So that did there is like a silver
Okay.
lining in
Beautiful.
some bad game jams, but God, what would I tell myself early on? I mean, portfolio is just never ending. Like the portfolio
Yeah.
is never done. So
Yeah.
that's
You just have to make peace with the portfolio and like never being happy with your
never
portfolio.
being happy, never being done. Always something to tweak. So
Totally.
that's a good question. Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on like what your goal is. So like for
Yeah.
me, if I had to start all over again, I would tell myself, okay, I'm gonna do one project at a time,
Hmm.
and it will be, for this many months, and then once that project is done, I will then take like a couple of weeks to make like a case study about it, really refine it, and
Yeah.
then move on to the next one versus doing everything concurrently, because my portfolio is due for a massive update with like all the stuff I'm working on.
Yes.
So I think doing one
Yeah.
thing at a time is something I would do from the beginning. But like finding you and finding a small loan is the first item on the agenda.
And that is exactly what you did, and we're so lucky for it. I'm going to, because you've got stuff to do. As we've established, you are busy. So unfortunately, as much as I would like to sit here all day and just have a nice old gab, I've got to let you go at some point.
That's fine.
So to end us off, could you answer a very big question, which is what is your favorite game? It's a huge question, I know.
God, that's so hard. Okay, my favorite game this year, last
Yeah.
year, give me something tangible so that way I don't.
Yeah, let's set the parameters. Okay, what game do you think you've put the most amount of hours into?
My entire life?
Yeah.
Sims.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sims, yes. And I'm not sure if Sims does the voice acting the way they used to, but I would love to be hired as a voice actor to speak that
Oh my
Simlish. That'd be
god.
great. Like I know like
Yeah.
Katy Perry like sang one of her hit songs like in Simlish, and that's like one of
Yeah.
my little YouTube videos. So I'm like, I would love to like read the gibberish in the script. Like,
Oh
that's
my god, that's so fun. There's one TikTok person I found a while ago, and she did Fergalicious but in Simlish, and it's like
oh my
I play it from time to time. I think it's the best thing ever. It is incredible. Yes, absolutely. I can totally see you as one of the Sims
yeah.
for sure. Would you be
Yeah.
one of the land grabs?
Oh my god, they go back. The rich and snouty. Yes. I've been making my own families since like high school. So I make
Yeah.
my own family. I put them in a huge house.
Yeah.
I've been trying to be honest, but I don't have time to be honest. So motherload, I hit that cheat code to get that
Yes.
because it's expensive in the virtual world.
It really is. Yes, you gotta
It's
sit. You gotta.
expensive.
Those kids want to be astronauts. You know, like that's not cheap.
Yes. You want these kids to go to private school? I'm sorry, we're gonna need the 4-bedroom house. I don't have 400,000 right now, but in a second I will. Can
Oh man,
buy
if
the
only
house.
real life worked like that, that would
Oh,
be
I
great.
wish.
That would be cool. Well, that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for joining me, Steph. I'm definitely gonna bring you on a future episode of something. We'll
Yeah,
have some excuse
for
to sit down and
sure.
talk
I mean, I know
game
there's a
design.
voiceover episode coming up. I'm like, should I step into that? Like, do you want to talk about that? Like,
Amazing! Yeah, absolutely. We are gonna see you in the future, but for now, we're gonna say goodbye. Thank you for joining us at the Ouroboros Express Devlogs.
yes.